Hello everyone and welcome to this series of Learn AngularJS step by step in 8 hours. Yes, you guessed it right, in 8 hours. Now, as we will learn AngularJS in this series step by step, we will also create a small project side by side. Because my belief is that when you learn any technology, if you just learn part by part, if you just take topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, it becomes very academic. But the time you take a technology and you start doing a project, you learn quickly, you learn to the point, and you learn in a very practical way. So in this complete series, I'm going to go and teach you AngularJS, but also I will be executing a project side by side so that you learn not just theoretically, but practically. So let us first try to understand what exactly is AngularJS. What is the motive of AngularJS? AngularJS is nothing but it is a JavaScript framework which helps you to bind HTML UI with JavaScript objects. In simple words, it is a binding framework. Now at this moment, Angular has two versions. One is the 1.x version. When I say 1.x means 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, 1.4. So this is the 1.x version and there is a 2.0 version. The 2.0 version is actually still in beta and the 1.x version is been used in projects for past 5 to 6 years and it is very mature. So what we will do is we will start with the 1.x version. So you can see that the latest one is 1.5 at this moment. So we're going to use 1.5. And you can see that this version is in RC. That means it is a release candidate. It can be used in production while this version is in beta. So what we will do is we will start with the 1.x version, but in the later part of the video series, I will also cover 2.0 and we will see that what is the difference between 2.0 and the 1.x version. So this video series will be using 1.5 version for teaching. Now for this training, we will need two things. One is browser, and I specifically recommend, or I will say specifically for this training, please stick to Chrome browser. Why Chrome? Because Chrome has awesome debugging capability for Angular and JavaScript and jQuery. So when it comes to JavaScript debugging, I really love what Chrome does. So one is the Chrome browser and second is Visual Studio. Now Visual Studio is optional. If you wish, you can go and code in Notepad as well, but in Notepad you won't get those IntelliSense, right? So I'm going to use Visual Studio, but feel free to replace Visual Studio with Notepad or any other tool. So let us go ahead and let us create a simple project and let us try to understand that what do we mean by binding framework? What do we mean when we say Angular binds HTML and JavaScript object? Now, one very important point to note about Visual Studio is that Visual Studio is Microsoft's product, and because it's a Microsoft product, and when you go and you create a new project using Visual Studio, for example, you create ASP.NET or you create ASP.NET MVC or whatever, right? It will have that Microsoft's stamp on it. So in other words, when you create this project, you'll find that there are some C# files. You will find that there is some web config file. You will find that there is something which is related to Microsoft. But because we are learning Angular now, and mostly with Angular we'll be using HTML and jQuery and JavaScript, all of these technologies need only two things. One is HTML and one is JavaScript, right? So I do not really want in this project any kind of stamp of Microsoft. I just want HTML file and JavaScript file. So what I will do is I'm not going to go and use any one of these templates of Visual Studio. Actually, I'm going to go and open a website. So you can see that there is something here called as open a website. What is open a website? Open a website is nothing but it goes and it opens a folder, and in that folder I can go and add whatever things I need. I can control it. So when I take a template, when I say a new project solution, I get stuck with Microsoft. And also, if you observe very closely today's web architecture, it is divided into two things. One is the client side. Client side means what runs inside the browser, and one is the server side. So in client side, you have HTML, you have JavaScript, you have Angular, you have jQuery, you have knockout, you have the JavaScript and HTML running, right? And on the server side, you have the respective companies like Microsoft having ASP.NET, or you have JSP, or you have servlets, or you have PHP, right? So basically, if you see today's web architecture, it is divided into two parts. One is HTML JavaScript running on the client side, and the other one is the server side. So for now, because we are doing the client side technology, I don't want in this project any kind of stamp of Microsoft, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create a new folder, and I will say that in this folder, I'll name this folder as because we are doing a project, what we will do is we will do a very simple customer screen in Angular, where we will have customer code, we will have customer name and customer amount, right? So I will name this as Angular customer project. Okay, so in this folder, I'm going to go and create the Angular project, right? So I will say open the website. So remember, website means nothing but it's a folder, and inside the folder I will put CSS, I will put JavaScript, and so on, right? So remember that this folder at this moment is in my C drive, right? So in my C drive we have the Angular customer project, and I will just say open. So there you can see that my folder is opened, and at this moment I have nothing in this project. And if I go to the folder, I don't see anything created, and that's what I want, right? So let us go ahead and spend this coming 5-6 minutes discussing why Angular. When I gave the definition of Angular saying it's a binding framework, what does it mean actually? So let us go ahead and add a simple HTML page. Remember, this project is the client project. It's not going to have any ASP.NET, it's not going to have any C# code, right? So I'm going to go and add a new item here, and I will add a HTML page. So add a new item, and let us pick HTML. So you can see that there is a HTML file. So in this project, we are only concerned with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, right? And as we said that we are going to go and create a customer screen. So let me name this page as customer.html. So in this screen, we are going to have 3 fields: customer code, customer name, and customer amount. But before we move ahead, let us go and try to understand why Angular, and then we will start with the project. So you can see that I have this very simple website here, and it has only one HTML page in this, and I really like that how it is so lightweight, so much disconnected from C#. So we said that Angular binds HTML with JavaScript, right? Or I will say HTML UI with JavaScript. So you can see that I have created a very simple UI here. It just has 2 text boxes, customer name and customer code, and some div tags here to display data of customer name, customer code. So now this UI will actually talk with a JavaScript object. So there is a JavaScript object called as customer, and the customer UI HTML binds with it, right? Now in JavaScript, you do not have a class concept as such, but what you can do is you can create a function, and you can create an instance of that function. So basically, when you say create a class in JavaScript, it is something like this. So you'll say function, and you will define the properties using the this keyword. So this dot customer name is equal to Shiv, and this dot customer code is equal to 1001. So now we can create an instance of this customer class here. Now remember, I'm using this word class, but it is a function. But because I know that this tutorial will be watched by a lot of developers who are coming from background which is Java or C#, so I just want to make sure that I talk in their language. So basically, you would probably go and create a customer object from this JavaScript class, and your intention would be to bind this customer object with these text boxes. So you want to bind the customer name with this text box, you want to bind the customer code with this text box, right? So in order to achieve the same, what developers do, they write such kind of functions. So you can see that I have written two functions here. One is UI to object. UI to object means I will take the data from the UI. So you can see here I'm saying document dot get element ID by customer name, and I'm setting to the property, and here I'm saying document dot get element ID, that means from this text box, and set to this property, right? In the same way, we also need to have one more function here, object to UI. So object to UI means herein we will take the data from the object. So you can see here I'm taking the data from the customer object and pushing it to the UI. So normally what developers do, they write such kind of a binding code. Now this binding code comes in various forms. For example, when I talk with C# guys, they term this code as a behind code. Some people call this code as a controller code. Some people call this code as a gel code. So whatever it is, but this code binds the UI and the object. And think about it, if you have a table grid, then this binding code can become complex, right? And that's what exactly Angular does. Angular helps you to bind this UI and the object so that you don't have to write such kind of a binding code. So the first thing is, let us get Angular in our project. Now there are two ways of doing it. One is you can go to google.com and say AngularJS, right? And you can go here and download it manually. Remember, download the left side and not the right side. The right side is 2.0. So you can go here and download the AngularJS file and put it into your project. So that is one way of doing it. The other way is, if you want to use the Visual Studio feature, you can use something called as manage NuGet packages. And you can go and search for Angular here. So I can go and say AngularJS. Now you can see that we have come up with a lot of search in Angular here. What we need to use in a project at this moment is Angular core. Now remember that at the core, Angular is a binding framework, but Angular became so famous that people wanted to use it with Bootstrap, people wanted to use it for single page application, people wanted to animate it and whatnot. So the other Angulars, what you see over here, are nothing but they are modules of Angular, they are extensions of Angular, but the core Angular only does binding. Remember, Angular's main goal is binding. For example, jQuery's main goal is to make your JavaScript simple, right, and to make it compatible with browsers. But at the end of the day, what happened is jQuery was used at a lot of places, so people wanted jQuery grid, people wanted jQuery tree view control and whatnot, and then the other parts of jQuery got created. So in the same way, we have Angular core here, and then we have lots of other subsets, but at the heart, at the core, the whole goal of Angular was binding, binding and binding, right? So let us go and install Angular core for now. The other modules, we will speak as we go by. So there you can see that Angular has been brought into my project. You can see this red sign here saying that the package is installed. And if I go here, you can see very neatly Visual Studio has created a scripts folder, and in that he has put files of Angular. Now you can see that Angular has downloaded a couple of files here. The main file here is angular.js and angular.mean.js. Now this angular.js is the file which is a file with comments and proper indenting. If you see Angular mean.js, it is nothing but it is a compressed version of angular.js. So this Angular mean.js does not have comments, it does not have indenting. So when you are going to production, you will actually use Angular mean.js. When we are in development, we will use angular.js. So in our course, we are going to go and use angular.js because we are at this moment developing this project. You can also see there is something called as Angular mocks.js. This Angular mocks.js is meant for mock testing. We will talk about this later on. So for now, you can excuse this JS file. You don't have to look into it. But in case you are really curious what is mock testing, I would suggest to go and watch our mock testing video series what we have on questpond.com. With that you can get an idea of what exactly mock testing is, but this thing over here is for testing. So for now, let us go and start with AngularJS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and delete all of this, because Angular has promised me that he can bind my customer object with my screen, right? So let us go ahead and let us see that how Angular does the magic for us. So I'm going to go and first drag and drop this angular.js file on my screen here, so that I have reference to Angular. And now let us start coding. Now before I start showing you Angular syntaxes, I would like to make a very important point about Angular syntaxes. Angular syntaxes are declarative. So they are declarative in nature. Till now, if you're a programmer in C# or Java or JavaScript, you were using the procedural style of programming. Procedural style of programming means, for example, let us say you want to write a for loop, right? So what you do, you say, let us say you want to write a double for loop, I will say. So for int I equal to 0, and then you'll say I greater than something, right? And I plus plus, right? So you can have something like this, a for loop. So let us say it's a double for loop like this. So for inside a for, right? So if you see, now this is procedural. Okay, very quickly, let me expand this. So this is procedural. Here I write exactly how to achieve that double for loop. But in declarative, what I can do is I can just say here 1000 by 1000. So in declarative, we have tags, we declare it, we don't say how we are going to achieve it. While in procedural, we exactly say how to do it, right? So till now you have been a procedural programmer, must be you are doing jQuery or JavaScript or C#, where you exactly write what you want to achieve. But in Angular, you just declare it and it works. So all Angular syntaxes starts with the word ng hyphen and then whatever. So ng hyphen bind, ng hyphen change, ng hyphen controller. So ng, that word, two-letter word ng comes from that word Angular. So ANGULAR. So ng hyphen. Now also a quick note here. Why they have provided this letter hyphen in between? Why didn't Angular say ng animate or ng app or ng bind? HTML specification says that if you don't want to collide with my tags, then create tags with the letter hyphen in between or the word hyphen in between. HTML specification says that I would never create any kind of tag with the word hyphen, right? So if you see any framework like Knockout or Angular, they all use the word hyphen so that they do not clash with HTML tags, because HTML will never create a tag with the word hyphen, right? So the first step, what is the first step if I want to bind this class with this UI? The first step is I need to create an instance. I need to say customer obj equal to new customer and bind it with the customer screen, right? So that is done by the declarative tag ng controller. So ng controller customer. So what this word over here says is that he will create an object of customer internally and bind it with the customer screen. Now you also want to bind the property. So for that we have ng model. So ng model, and with this text box I want to bind customer name. Again ng model. With this text box I want to bind customer code. So remember I said that Angular is declarative, declarative and declarative. In other words, these two tags here, ng controller and ng model, do the following things. First, this ng controller tag creates an instance of the new customer object. Second, the two ng model tags here, provide the input, or they bind it with the text box. So they take the property value and bind it to the text box. Right, now we would also like to display this value somewhere, right? For example, when you go and type something on the screen, right, it will go and update this customer object internally. But we would like to also go and display this value on a div tag or on a span tag or somewhere. So to display the value, we need to use something called as expression. So if I want to just display that what is typed in this customer name, you can see that down below in the div tag, I am specifying an expression. Expression starts with double curly brackets and ends with a double curly brackets. So on the top, I want to display customer name, and down I want to display the customer code. So you can see that how easy it is to bind your objects with Angular. If you remember our previous code, where we were having those two methods, we were setting the properties, and here we are on Angular now, just tagging, tagging, and tagging. Now, let me put you in thinking shoes. Let us say I have two ng controllers like this. Let us say I have two div tags and two ng controllers like this, what you see on your screen. Now a very simple question to you. In this scenario, will we have two instances or single instance created? Because remember what I said sometimes back, this ng controller over here creates an instance of this customer class. So the question here is that, will he create different instances and tie to this div tag, or will he create one big instance and tie up to both the div tags? Think about it. What do you think? I will give you 5 seconds on this. So I know that the answer in your head would be two different instances, because logically as a programmer you would think that if I have created two UIs, then I want a different instance here and I want a different instance here, right? And in one single UI, it is very much possible that you will have 2-3 classes. So you will have customer, you will have supplier. So you don't want one global instance, right? For all the controllers, you want different instances so that you can manage your UI properly. So over here, definitely, you want a different instance of customer class here and a different instance of a customer class here. So if that is the logical answer, the next question is, so if we have 2-3 controller instances in a page, what is the scope of that instance? For example, this customer object, what is the scope? The whole HTML. And this customer, what is the scope? So if we are talking about multiple instances in the same HTML of Angular, so if we are saying that there are multiple instances Angular will create, the question is, what is the scope of both the objects? Now, as per Angular's thought process, the scope of this customer instance is from this div tag start to the end of this div tag. So this is the scope of the customer object, that means of this customer object, and the scope of this customer object is start of this div tag till the end of this div tag, right? So there are two instances and the scope is from the start of the tag till the end of the tag. Now please remember that it is not compulsory that you need to go and define ng controller over a div tag. It can be a form tag, it can be a span tag, it can be anything, right? So the scopes of both these instances are completely isolated from each other. In other words, this customer variable cannot be accessed inside this ng controller div tag, okay? But now the question is, who does this scope instancing? Who is responsible to create a scope and attach to this div tag start and end and to this div tag start and end? Because if you see at this moment, the variables are connected to this instance. So this instance means if I go and create an object of customer, let us say I go and create an object of customer saying obj1 is equal to new customer like this. So, and if I create one more instance, let us say obj2, Now this instance variable, right, is different from this instance variable. So basically here, if you see this instance, right, this keyword points to the current instance of the object. And now here we are talking about instances, which are defined to a tag, right? So definitely, this keyword won't work here. So there should be something else over here. And that's where exactly Angular gives you a service called as $scope. Again, I repeat, Angular has a ready-made service called as $scope. So rather than using this instance, you need to go and use the $scope variable or $scope service, I will say, not a variable, $scope service of Angular. But now the question is that where does this $scope object come from? Means do we need to go and declare something like this where $scope is equal to new something, right? Or where does this object actually come from? So you don't need to go and declare this object. You need to go and define this object as a parameter of your function, and Angular will automatically come in and inject this object. Again, I repeat, Angular will automatically come in. He will hunt for the $scope parameter, and he will inject a ready-made object and give it to you. This is termed as dependency injection. In case you are new to dependency injection, I would suggest you to go and watch the videos on QuestPond, where we have talked about dependency injection and inversion of control. But let me quickly give you a one-line definition over here. Dependency injection is a concept, wherein the framework comes in and injects the object rather than you creating it. Now you would wonder that what is the benefit of dependency injection? The benefit here is, now for example, if you see, let us say that some instances are tied up to a div tag, right? Some instances can be tied up to a span tag. Some instances can be global, right? So in case, if let us say, you were supposed to take up that work of creating the object, then it would be like this: $scope is equal to new div instance, right? Or new span instance. So rather than you getting into decision making of what kind of instance should be created, Angular says that you don't worry about it. You worry about your business logic. You worry about attaching the variables, binding the variables. I will take care of instance management. I will hunt for that tag, and I will inject the appropriate instance management object to you. So with dependency injection, you get decoupled from unnecessary work. So remember, there are two concepts, which you can go and see the video on QuestPond VD. One is inversion of control. Inversion of control means invert your unnecessary things to someone else and you concentrate on your work. For example, over here, what is the work of this customer class? The work of this customer class is to look into customer name property, is to look into customer code property, is to do validations of their property, is to do some other things which is related to customer, not getting into scope management, and then which it is attached to a div tag or a span tag, what is the lifetime of the object, and etc. So that he says that I will take care of it. So when I go and write a $scope like this, it means that the $scope object will be dependency injected by the Angular framework. Remember, the complete framework of Angular, as I go ahead teaching you in the class, you will see that it is dependency injection, and dependency injection. So remember, these are termed as services: $scope, and then you will see $HTTP, you will see $SC. So whatever you see by the word dollar in Angular, these are ready-made services of Angular, and if you want to use them, you cannot create an object of it, and Angular creates them automatically inside. You have to just go and reference like this, and Angular will do the dependency injection for you. So now this is great. We have different instances. Each one of these instances are created automatically by the $scope. Each one of these instances are isolated from each other. They have their own scope. So instance of this customer is from this div tag to this div tag, and instance of this customer is from this div tag to this div tag. So they are completely isolated from each other. Now, even if they are isolated, at the end of the day, they are running inside the same page, the same HTML page, right? So at some moment of time, definitely, I would like that these instances to communicate with each other. For example, now think about, you have a web page where you have two controller instances of Angular, one of customer and one of address. So definitely, you would like that both of these instances should be isolated, definitely. But also at some moment of time, if the customer wants the address data, he should be able to access it. If the address wants the customer data, he should be able to access it. So in other words, I do not really want it to be so isolated that they cannot talk with each other. And that's where exactly we have something called as app or ng app. Ng app is a instance, which is global, right, to your page. It's Angular object which is global to the page, and all the ng controller instance belongs to the app. So the ng app, you can go and define it on the body. So you can say here ng app, and you can give some name here, my app. Now remember again, this ng app has to be defined on a tag in such a way that it encloses all the ng controllers. For example, over here you can see I have defined it on the body tag, so it actually encloses all the controller. Again, there is no compulsion that you should define ng app on the body. It can be on a form or it can be on a div tag. In other words, I can also go ahead and define it on a div tag. But again, the requirement here is that this div tag should enclose all the other div tags where the ng controllers are defined, right? So I can go and define ng app here as well, no problem. Okay, but the point is that because this app is the top object of all the controller instances, it should be defined in such a way that it encloses all the tags of ng controller. So you can think about, there is an internal Angular DOM, a document object model, where we have app at the top, and then we have ng controller instances. So we have the app instance, the ng app instance at the top, and then we have lot of ng controller instances. And at any moment of time, if these ng controller instances want to communicate with each other, right, or if you want to control them, then they go via the ng app. So we are all set up now. We have the ng app, we have the ng controllers, we have the scope management system at place. But at the end of the day, somebody has to come in and kickstart all this, right? Somebody has to go and create object of the app, create object of controller. So there should be some kind of a startup code which kicks off Angular. Because remember, at the end of the day, these are simple tags, and these are tags with this thing called hyphen. So if it is hyphen, the browser will never parse them because it is not HTML. Remember, as HTML says, that any tag with the word hyphen in it is not my tag, right? So definitely, this is not tag of HTML, so browser will just leave it, but then somebody has to parse it. And who will parse it? Angular. So at some place we have to kick off Angular and say, okay, now here is the app, here are the controllers, start working, right? And that's where we need two lines of code here. One is we need to create the app. So I'll say where my app is equal to Angular. This is the way we call Angular directly, right? Angular.module. So can you go and load my module, my app? So at this moment we have only my app module. So I'm loading it. And square brackets, right? So what is the square brackets? Now remember that it is very much possible that modules are not only your modules. Sometimes you want to go and load modules which are subsets of Angular, or which are created from the Angular framework. For example, if you remember, when we saw the NuGet package, we said that there is core Angular, and then there are other Angular frameworks as well, like ng routing, then you have ng animation, right? Angular animation. So do you want to go and load any kind of third-party Angular modules over here other than the core? So at this moment I'm not loading them, but in the later part of the videos, I will show that how to go and load third-party Angular modules and how to use them. So the first thing is I've created my app. The second thing is I need to go and tell to this app that at this moment we have one controller. So my app dot controller. So we have one controller called as customer. So I'm just registering my customer class with the app. And one more point I want to mention here, probably I missed that point and I would like to just emphasize it. In one HTML body or in one HTML file, you can only have one ng app. Again, I repeat, in one HTML file, you can only have one app. You cannot have multiple apps. You can have multiple controllers. They belong to the app, but you cannot have multiple apps. Now, just again a bit on these parameters, what are passed to the controller function. Now, what we are saying here is that we are saying that we want to attach this customer class, and this is the name actually. For example, this can be customer here, and you can say you can register it by the name customer obj. And so this is like a key you can think about, a name which will be referenced in the HTML. So you can see the actual name is customer, but I have registered it as customer obj, so I can just say here obj. So basically that first part, the first string over there is nothing but it is the name of the controller which you want to use inside your HTML in the Angular tags or in the Angular directive, and this is the actual customer class, right? So great. So we are all set. Our app is done. Inside the app we have registered the controllers, and we are ready to go and run this page. Now very quickly, just before I do the control F5 and run this inside the browser, you can see that I have registered the controller only once, but I have created the instance of the controller multiple times. So you can see here, this customer controller is registered by the name customer obj, and it is done only once. I did not say again register it, but you can see that I have used it multiple times over here. So remember that this is just a registration process. It just says that, okay, inside this app, this controller is there, but how many instances will be created will depend on how many times you have used ng controller. So here you can see that I have used 2 times the ng controller, so 2 instances will be created, but I don't have to go again and again and say that my app dot controller like this. But in case I had something called a supplier, for example, let us say that I had a supplier over here like this, right? Then yes, then for this again I have to say my app dot controller supplier, right? So remember that for the registration process is only once, but the instantiation process can be multiple times, right? So let us go ahead and do a control F5 and let us see the output inside the browser, if everything is okay or not. And there you can see that my browser is running. The first thing what you see over here is you can see that we already had some initial data, right, which we had supplied to the class, and you can see that the data is automatically binded. You can see over here these expressions are displaying the values inside the div tag, and because of that ng model, because of this ng model, you can see that the variables have got binded to the text boxes. Now as we said that this instance is different from this instance, so in other words, if I go and change over here, it should not go and affect this instance, right? So if I go and change here, if I say this is Shiv Koirala, I'm sorry, if I go and say this is Shiv Koirala, you can see when I type here, automatically the object gets changed and automatically it goes and updates the div tag, but it does only for this controller instance. You can see at the top This is one instance, and this instance here does not affect the top instance. Remember, every time you write the ng controller, a new instance is created. So you can see that two instances are created, and the binding is happening absolutely fine. So you can see how easy it is with Angular to do binding. I just type here and it is done here. I just type here, it's binded here, right? So remember that the whole point about Angular is binding, binding, and binding. It is a binding framework. If you ever go and search Angular on the web very quickly, if you ever say AngularJS, right, you come to this site here, angularjs.org. Look at this, what it says: MVW framework. MVW, right? So what is the model here? The model here is this JavaScript object, this JavaScript class, right? That M stands for the model. What is the view here? The view here is this div tag, this customer screen. And what is the W? This W is that whatever code. Now what happens is, some people, this code, which binds the model and the view, some of the people call this code as the view model. Some of the people call this code as a presenter. For example, if you are an ASP.NET Web Form guy, you can call this code as a behind code. Some of the people call this code as a gel code. Whatever is that code which binds this UI and this customer. So that W stands for whatever. So remember, Angular is a MVW framework. It is a binding framework. It helps you to connect JavaScript object with the UI. So I hope that, the first time when I said the definition some 30-40 minutes back, I hope that it is now getting clarified, right? So it is a MVW framework, and it is really, really super heroic. Okay. Great. Now I would like to emphasize 2 points about expression. So let me do like this. I'm going to go and delete one of these div tags here, because the purpose of showing multiple div tags and multiple controllers was that to show you that there were multiple instances internally, right? So let me go and delete this. Now I need to make two important statements about expression. The first thing is that the expressions what you see over here, do not need any kind of an element. For example, at this moment I have put inside a div tag, but you can happily go and delete this. So you can happily go and delete this and say br and a br. So basically expressions don't really need any kind of a tag. They can be displayed anywhere. That is the first thing. And second thing is, expressions get evaluated. In other words, you can go and write expression saying 1 + 2 and it will show it as a 3, or you can go and write expression saying, okay, show me customer name plus customer code. So it will go and concatenate both the variables. So basically expressions get evaluated. Okay, so expression, don't think about it is just to go and display inside a div tag or a span tag. No, it can be displayed anywhere, irrespective it is inside an element or outside an element. And second is, expressions get evaluated mathematically and functionally. So in other words, it can get concatenated or it can get added and so on, right? So if I go and run this, so rather than running this, I can just go and reload this. So there it is. You can see this is a concatenation, right? And this 1 + 2 here says 3, right? So that is a mathematical operation. So that is a very important point about expression. They get evaluated and they don't need to be contained inside any kind of a HTML tag. So great. So our application is running so smooth, so I just type is smooth and it comes inside the div tag smooth, right? But I hope that life was smooth, the way our first application ran here. Everybody has issues in life. We have problems. In the same way, when it comes to programming languages, we also have problems. We will get into issues. We get errors. So let us try to understand that what kind of common errors we can get in Angular. Okay. Now remember that Angular is case sensitive. Because why Angular is case sensitive? Because JavaScript is case sensitive and Angular uses JavaScript internally. So in case, the first mistake, what a lot of people do is they do something like this, the scope is completely in small letters. So I've seen developers doing this. So if you do this, right, nothing works. So the first sign that Angular is not working, right, is that you start seeing your expressions like this. So that means that, oh, Angular is not working, Angular has not got loaded, something is wrong here, so none of this thing will work here, right? So how do we go and detect this error? Remember I said use Chrome. Why? Because Chrome is the friend, when it comes to JavaScript debugging, right? So you have Chrome here. I can see that Angular is not working because I am seeing the expression curly brackets right away displayed. So do a F12. F12 actually pops up the developer console, right? So the first thing what you see in the Chrome developer tool is you can see the red sign over here. I have moved my mouse. You can see this red sign here which indicates that there is an error, right? So let us go and read this error. In order to read this error, you can see that there is something called as console here. So click on this. So first thing is you will look at the right hand side and you'll see, oh, there is an error. Yes. And then go to the console and you get some kind of a cryptic message. It does not say like, dollar scope is there, the dollar scope error or something. It just gives you some cryptic message saying injector unknown provider, right? Something in Greek. It looks like a Greek language, right, for us. Remember I said that Angular works on dependency injection. So basically these objects here, these services actually, I shouldn't use that word objects, it is services of Angular. These services are injected by Angular. So Angular comes in and injects this object. So when you get this injector unknown provider, so it says that I don't know what is this dollar scope with the S capital, right? So the first kind of error which I always see is like dollar injected provider. So this means that there is something wrong, and you can see that it does provide you here saying dollar scope, but at the first time it is very difficult to get about this error. So remember, whenever you see this injector error, there is something wrong over here, right? So that is the first kind of error. So if I go and fix this and if I reload this, it should work. So the first kind of error which you see is the injector error. The other kind of error, which is very easy to understand and identify is, for example, now, you can see that I'm saying an angular.module, but now let us say I type the M capital, for some reason, I just go and type the M capital. So if I run this, now I will not get an injector error, but there will be some different kind of error, and let us try to interpret it. So I have done a Control F5 again. This says that my Angular is not running. That is okay. I will do F12 here. I will go to console, and you can see that there is an injector error here, but don't get confused. First look at the top error. Remember, here you can get confused because now you're seeing an injector error, but look at the top error. It says that angular.module is not a function, right? And it also tells you the line number. So you can see here, when I click on this customer.html, it actually goes and points me here. So in this case, it clearly says that what the error is. So again, this is a second kind of error. So one is the injector error, where you go and type something wrong at the top, and second is in case you go and invoke the Angular functions with a wrong name. And one more kind of error which is very common is you define the controller name with customer obj, and for some reason you go and mistype here the name, right? So in this case again, you will have problems. You'll say F12 console, and it says that customer obj is not a function and got undefined, right? So the C is capital, right? So again, when you get like this, that means something is wrong with the name, right? So so these were some common errors which you can get in Angular, and I just showed you that how you can debug them. Now remember that in case you are a person from Microsoft, remember that Visual Studio does not have these capabilities of debugging, because Visual Studio is a tool which is for C#, right? So really it does not have those debugging capabilities of Angular the way Chrome has. So remember that Chrome is your friend if you are doing Angular. Now when you are learning Angular, don't learn tags after tags after tags. In other words, don't try to create a big list of dictionaries saying, okay, what is an ng controller, what is an ng model, what is ng show and ng hide, and ng directive. You will just get into learning directives. You won't learn the internals of Angular. Internals of Angular is more important than learning a long list of directives. So let us go ahead and spend some time talking about how does Angular work internally. How does he create these objects internally? Can we see these objects? Can we visualize them? Or can we actually look at them and understand Angular better? Let me go ahead and copy two div tags here. Right. So I've just copied the div tag back again. So 2 times I've copied div tags. That means we are going to have 2 instances over here. So what happens? What happens internally? When an Angular page loads inside the browser, what happens first? So first, when a page loads which has Angular syntaxes in it, the first thing is the browser goes and runs over the HTML and creates the DOM. So for example, now you can see this is the HTML over here. So the browser is actually an interpreter, right? So it will interpret, okay, this is the body. So he will create a document for this. After that, he sees this is a div. He will create a div object for it. So internally, the HTML browser, whatever it is, Chrome or Internet Explorer, it goes and it creates a DOM which has a window at the top, then a document, then a div tag or a form, whatever it is. So it creates the HTML DOM. Once the DOM is created and ready in memory, after that Angular runs. So then Angular starts. And when HTML runs, so when HTML is running and creating the HTML DOM, what it does is it neglects those syntaxes which has hyphen. So he sees this syntax and says, oh, this is not my syntax. I can't do anything about it. Yes, this is a div tag. Let me parse it. This is a body tag. Let me parse it. But whatever is the hyphen, right? Whatever is the tag or the attribute with the name hyphen in it, he leaves those tags. So browser does not touch any tag with the word hyphen, right? Once the complete DOM is loaded in memory, after that Angular runs. Angular says, okay, where are my hyphen tags? He says, oh, this is ng app. So let me create an object internally. Oh, this is ng controller. So let me create an object internally. Oh, this is again an ng controller. So let me create one more object internally. Okay, this is an ng model. Let me set the values of the object. So once the DOM is loaded, what Angular does, he first goes to the ng app. He sees this ng app. Actually, because we have written this Angular module.load my app, so he goes here automatically. He knows that, okay, this my app has to be parsed. He sees this my app and internally he creates a top object called as $root scope. Again, I repeat, once the DOM is loaded, HTML DOM is loaded, Angular parser runs. He looks at this ng app and creates an internal object called as $root scope. After that, the parser moves ahead and he sees, okay, there is an ng controller. So he creates a $scope object. Again, he sees an ng controller. He creates a $scope object. Then he sees an ng model. So inside the first $scope object, he creates a customer name variable. Then he creates a customer code variable. Again, he sees an ng model. He creates a customer name variable inside the respective $scopes. So in other words, there are 2 objects in memory. One is the HTML DOM object, and then afterwards the Angular world. Angular world, where it has its own $root scope and scope objects. So this is good, but I would like to actually see that $root scope and scope. I would like to actually feel it. So if there is really a $root scope object, the next question is, can we access it? Yes, you can access it. The way you are accessing the $scope object, you can go and say to Angular, please give me $root scope. So you can go here and say that, please give me the $root scope object, and you can go and create a variable on the top of it. You can see that over here, I am saying that create a variable called as counter on the $root scope object, and I'm saying that in case the counter variable is not created, then return 0. So you can see the statement here. I'm saying that in case the counter variable is null or it is not giving out something, then give 0 and add 1 to it. So the way you are accessing $scope object, you need to go and access the $root scope object. Again, $root scope object is also dependency injected. So now if we go and display this variable, now remember that this is a global variable, right? So I can display this global variable over here, right? Or I can go and display this global variable anywhere, right? So I don't need that this global variable should be inside an instance of a ng controller, because this counter variable belongs to the $root scope. So now guess what should be the counter value that should be displayed here? 1, 2 or 3? Guess. Think for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. So have you thought? No? Let me tell you. Well, remember that this ng controller here, we have two ng controllers here, right? So that means that the object of the customer class will be created 2 times. So this code here will fire 2 times. So 2 times means this variable should be displayed as 2. So let us go and do a control F5. Let us see that if we can see 2 here, and you can see the value 2 here, right? And let me do something like this. Let me go and put a debugger here. Sometimes when we debug, things looks much better, right? So I put a debugger here, and I will do F12 again, Chrome debugging, and let us see in a debug mode how our application is working. So I'm going to go and do a reload. The time I do a reload, it actually comes here. Now you can see this is the first time the instance is getting created. That means this instance is getting created for the first ng controller. Great. So it goes here, it instantiates that counter value, makes it 1. Now I run it fully. You can see again the debugger has come here. Why? Because again for the other ng controller he creates an instance, right? So again this is for the second time, and we see the value 2. So remember, one is we have 2 in-memory document object model. One which is generated by the browser, which is termed as the HTML DOM, which gets created normally, and the second one is the Angular document object model, which has the $root scope and the $scope objects. But now think about a realistic situation where it is a live project, it is a big project, it is a professional project, and in a professional project you can expect lot of ng controllers, because when you talk about a single UI, you need the customer object, you need the supplier object, you need the address object. So you have lots of controllers, and you would like to get a visual view saying that okay, we have the $root scope, and then we have 10 scope objects or 20 scope objects inside it, and inside every scope objects we have these properties. So how we can get a visual view of our Angular document object model? So for that we have lots of open source tool out there, but one tool by which you can actually start is the Batrang tool. I don't know how to spell it, Batrang, Batrang, whatever it is. I'm going to say it's a Batrang tool. So you can go to Chrome here, and this tool is actually an extension. So you can go to settings, and you can go to extensions, and you can see that I have installed this AngularJS Batrang, but you can go here and click on this get more extensions, and you can go and search for the tool. So you can go to the Chrome Web Store. It's a free tool to start with, and you can search for Batrang extension. So Batrang, yes, yes. So where is it? Batrang, and say free. Okay. Batrang. Where do I see it? Enter. Yeah, there it is. I'm so sorry, I was just looking here and there. So you can see this Batrang tool here. Now remember, you can see 2 Batrang tools, but take the one which has a lot of people who have voted. So take that and install this inside your Chrome browser. So once you do that, for example, over here now our application is running. What I can do is I can do a F12, and once you install the tool, you can see this AngularJS over here like this. so which says that this is our Batrang tool. So click on that, and you need to go and enable the Batrang tool, so that you can actually see the scope objects and the $root scope objects. So click on enable, and once you click on enable, it just runs the application once so that it can start tracking. So I can now go to Batrang again. So I can go to scope. So you can see now. So it says that okay, what happened? Okay, let me run again. So AngularJS, yeah, there it is. There was something. So I just enable and disable it. So you can see now it says okay, so you have the top ng app, and for this ng app he has created a $root scope object, and it has two properties. One is the $ID, which is the internal ID, and the other one is the counter. Remember the counter which we created, that is this. Now let us go to the second $scope object, right? Remember that this $scope object is created because of this ng controller. So you can see in that he says that okay, this is Shiv and this is 1001, and again you can see that there is a second ng controller, and again for that there are some values. If you go back and if you try to change something, for example, let us say I change this to Shiva. If I do that, you can see that he says that okay, the other controller instance customer name is now Shiva. So at the top you can see that there is $root scope, and then down below you have the $scope object. So this is the internal Angular document object model which gets formed. And just very a quick note about this tool. This tool is very good to start with to understand the Angular fundamentals, but when it comes to real projects where you want to really debug and see the values and see the performance, then there are some more better open source tool we can talk about. But it's a good tool to start with. I don't use this tool personally when I work on live Angular projects. I have some different tools for consideration, but at least for startup today, it's the first lecture. I don't want to stress up with a lot of open source tool and confuse you. So still it's a good tool to start up with. Now I would like to also point towards a very typical behavior of Angular, that is auto properties. For example, now think about this. You have two properties here, customer name and customer code, and by mistake you go and type here customer name 1. Okay, let us say by mistake you go and type here customer name 1. So what Angular does, he does not throw up an error, he executes it. So if you go here and if you do a reload, let us say, you can see that it is working. If I change here, it is working. But now the next question is that how is it working? Because I was expecting that we would land up into some kind of exception, and it does not throw any exception. So let us do like this. Let us go and reload this project again. So reload this website, and let us go to our Batrang tool, and let us see that if we are seeing any exceptions. So I'm going to go to the Batrang tool here. I'm going to go to AngularJS, and let us see what happens. If you see, first thing, okay, we have the app and we have one variable here called as counter, perfectly right. Then I see controller, I have two variables here, perfectly right. The second controller, perfectly right, right? But where is the customer name 1? It has not got created. Now let us go here and start typing. The time I type it, you can see now the customer name 1 variable has got created. In other words, when you define a property or when you define a variable in the ng model, it automatically gets created. Now I'm not really aware that why this behavior is there in Angular, but I want to just make sure that I communicate to you about this behavior, because many times you define the property, you have not defined the property, you make a typo mistake in ng model and your application is still running and you are still wondering that why is it running. So remember that Angular has this typical behavior that if you define a variable in the ng model and if you have not defined in the JavaScript class, it automatically goes and creates it. So if this is a class and these are properties of the class, definitely then a class should also have the facility to create methods, right? So let us say I want to create a method called as submit, and this submit method takes this customer name and customer code and adds it to the database, right? So in order to create a method, I can say that okay, here is a method I'm creating called as submit, and then you give to that submit inline function, right? So you can see that he has created an inline function over here, right? And here I can say, like, for now I'll just say if dollar scope dot customer name dot length is equal to 0, then I will say that it is not a proper data. So I'll say not a proper data. It is not a good practice to put UI controls like alert, to do UI invocation like alert or text box calls inside the business class. I think that this is a business class. I'm visualizing this as a business class. So putting alert is not a good idea here, but at this moment just leave it. We'll see what to do later on, right? And I will say here alert. This is a proper data, right? Okay. So a very simple method I have created called as submit, and this method I want to go and invoke it from a button. So let us say that we have some button here. Let me go and delete one more screen from here. We had created 2 ng controllers, right? So let me delete all of these. So let us say that I have a button here. So let me create a button. And when you are actually using Visual Studio, one of the good things about Visual Studio is the code snippets. So when you type input, you can see these small scissor signs here. So you can just say input and then say tab, 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 right? So just you write the word input and then you say tab, tab, tab like this, right? So I can say a type button, right? And I will say submit, right? So now if we want to go and invoke this method here, normally what JavaScript developers do, they go and say something like this. They will say that, okay, on this button, when there is an on click event, please go and call the submit function, right? But now think for a while, will this work? Okay, I'm trying to call this submit function when the click event happens. So when the click event happens, I want this submit function to be invoked. But think for a while, will this work? So let me do a Control F5. Let us go and test it. So now if you try to click on this button, you can see that it is not working, right? We are not seeing any one of these alerts, right? So why? Can you guess? First thing, let us go and see the error. So let me do F12, and you can see that at the backend he's saying submit is not defined. So S capital, yes, S is capital. So can you guess why is he saying that submit is not defined when it is defined? Just think for a while. I'll give you 5 seconds. And also let me give you a hint. This submit button, this submit function at this moment belongs to the dollar scope. Getting it? No? Okay, so let me explain. Remember I said, we have 2 document object model. One is the Angular document object model, where we have root scope and scope, right? And the other one is the HTML document object model, where we have, your body and then forms and div tags and all those, right? So basically what happens is, when you call a change event or when you click or a click event, in Angular, it should first go to the Angular DOM. Angular DOM will first interpret it and then send it to the HTML DOM, and then HTML DOM will do the invocation, and the necessary updated HTML will be seen on the browser, right? Now when I click on this submit, and when I have written that one on click event, that on click event is not telling that this submit belongs to which scope. Remember, at this moment this submit belongs to a scope. It belongs to an Angular scope. So that submit is somewhere there inside in one of those scopes. So if you want to go and call this submit, you need to actually call the submit that belongs to that scope instance. Again, I repeat, you need to go and call the submit function which belongs to that scope instance. So in other words, this submit button is not lying on HTML DOM, or it is not a very general object. It is a typical native object of Angular at this moment. So if it has to be called, it has to be called via the Angular, right? So that's why you cannot go and call the submit button submit function like this by using on click of JavaScript, you need to use Angular events. So you need to say ng click. So remember, Angular also has events, which can be created by directives or which can be defined by using directives, right? So if I do this now, if I do a reload, it should work. You can see now it is showing proper data. If I go and delete this, it should say not a proper data. Great, right? So remember, ng click is needed because we want to call the submit function, and the submit function belongs to the $scope. So only Angular knows, that is ng click knows how to access that submit function. When you go and write on click of JavaScript, he has no idea how this Angular DOM is internally. So remember, anyone who is external to Angular like JavaScript or jQuery or any other framework, JavaScript framework, who is external to Angular, right? He has no idea of the Angular document object model, and he has to go and make calls via Angular. Great. So that brings us to the end of this 1 hour session, or I will rather say it is more than a 1 hour session, right? I would like to congratulate you to reach till this 1 hour and bear with me for this 1 hour. So in this 1 hour we completed talking about why Angular. We saw that how Angular fulfills that MVW architecture. We talked about ng model, we talked about ng controller, we talked about ng app, we talked about $scope, we talked about ng click, we talked about $root scope. We talked about how to debug Angular and what kind of errors you will get in Angular. We talked about something called as auto created properties, and a lot of things we saw here. So I hope that you enjoyed this 1 hour video. Now, because that you have beared me for this 1 hour, I would like to give you a small gift, because I think that people don't even see today half an hour movies properly. So in case you have reached till here, I think you deserve appreciation. So what I'm going to give you is, I'm going to go and give you a nice ebook. This ebook is nothing but it is having Angular short notes. Okay, small Angular short notes, like what is AngularJS. So with a nice diagram, explanation, then basically what are directives in Angular, what are controllers, what are these, what are that, so basically small code snippets and small explanation with nice diagrams and nice explanation. So if you want this gift, then I'm putting two conditions before you. The first one, you have to see this part of the video, the 1 hour video, which you have already done. And the second one is, you need to go and share this YouTube video link either on Facebook, either on Twitter, either on LinkedIn or somewhere. So once you share it, what you have to do is you have to go and email us on questpond@questpond.com and say that, okay, see, here is the link I have shared, right? And can you please give me this ebook, and I will give it to you happily, right? So I hope that we share this knowledge out, because I think if anybody who wants to kickstart Angular, then this 1 hour video would really bring him on track. And in case you are a questpond.com member, in case you have a paid member, you don't have to do any one of these. You get this short notes as download. Great. Now with this we complete this 1 hour video. So what is the next video on? So the next video we are going to go and talk about something called as the Angular digest cycle. Remember, I said when you are learning Angular, don't learn Angular directive after directive. For example, if you saw here, if I would have just taught you like ng click, ng model, ng controller, ng app, don't learn directive after directive. Any Angular training which has just directive after directive, then you are not learning Angular. Learn the Angular internals, like, okay, how does it create an instance, what is this scope object, what is this $root scope object, right? So on. So try to understand the internals of Angular. I think for directives, there are a lot of great help on the main site itself, right? So the next video is again going to go in depth into internals of Angular. How does Angular work internally? Remember that when you go and type like this, this kind of automatic update needs a lot of work at the back end. So it is very great to see this is happening. Okay, it is all automatic, and it looks so nice for small applications. But to achieve this automatic, definitely Angular is doing a lot of hard work at the background. So we need to understand this hard work, because if you don't understand that hard work, and for that hard work the other name is digest cycle. So this is what is happening is all because of digest cycle. So if you don't understand that digest cycle, then you can have an Angular application which is bad in performance. So you need to know the repercussion of this auto update what is here, right? So the next video is on Angular digest cycle.